Today's story is about a group of friends who enter a deep forest where humans are forbidden to go. The people in this city do not believe in the old stories that warn against entering those places. They think they are just myths. However, what happens there is truly terrifying. This story is full of adventure and mystery. It all begins with a warning. Throughout the world, there are dangerous places that ancient texts mention, advising people to stay away. These places contain things beyond human comprehension, and those who ignore the warnings often regret it. Then we see Scott, a nervous young man in the forest recording a video. His hands are trembling as he says that this is no joke. He explains that he is an American tourist who arrived at the Darien forest in Panama with his friends. By mistake, they ventured into a part of the jungle where they were not supposed to be. Now something strange is following him, and before he can finish asking for help, a terrifying scream fills the air, and Scott and his friends disappear without a trace. The story then takes us 2 days earlier to uncover what led to the horrifying events in the jungle. Scott and his girlfriend Steve were on vacation with their friends. While packing for their flight, they received a video call from Elena, Trevor, and Charlie, who had already arrived in Panama and were enjoying a party on the beach, laughing and joking. Scott told them that he and Steve would be there at noon since their flight was in 2 hours. After enjoying the call, the couple headed to the airport. Upon landing in Panama, Scott and Steve boarded a van sent by their hotel. The journey was long since the hotel was deep in the jungle, making the trip take much longer than expected. Finally, they arrived and reunited with their friends. That night, the group celebrated on the beach while dancing and drinking. Trevor met a local girl named Carmen and started flirting with her. They chatted for a while, and soon Carmen joined their group. As the night progressed, another local, Julio, arrived, whom Carmen introduced to everyone. They all continued partying together. The night was full of music, dancing, and laughter, unaware of the horror that awaited them in the coming days. That night, while everyone else was relaxing, Scott was browsing the internet looking for nearby places to visit and activities for the next day. While searching, he came across an article about the Darien Gap jungle. The deeper he dug, the more unsettling he found. All the tourists who had ever ventured into that jungle had mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Intrigued, Scott continued his investigation and found an online video. In the footage, a group of tourists is seen walking towards the Darien Gap when suddenly they see something strange in the distance. The moment they laid eyes on the eerie figure, panic overtook them and they turned to run. Scott had no idea that in just 2 days he would be recording a similar video. Instead of feeling fear, Scott was excited by the mystery and danger surrounding the jungle. The images of its unspoiled beauty fascinated him and made him anxious to explore it. The next morning, Julio came up with the idea of sharing the video he had found. Julio listened carefully before shaking his head. He admitted that there indeed was an impressive waterfall deep in the jungle, but he warned Scott that his grandfather had always forbidden him from going there. According to local legends, something in that jungle was beyond human understanding. The indigenous tribe living nearby believed in terrifying creatures called chupacabras, evil spirits that were neither completely human nor completely animal. These creatures killed anyone who entered the jungle. Julio said in a serious tone that this was why no one ever came back as expected. The people in the city found Julio's warning amusing, dismissing it as mere superstition. As they continued with their activities, Steve told Elena about an emergency app she had installed on her phone. She explained that the app could automatically upload videos and photos to YouTube and Facebook in real time. Not only that, but it could also recognize contacts and tag them in the post, alerting them that the user was in danger. It was designed as a safety tool for emergencies. Later that night, the group sat around a bonfire, laughing and chatting. The conversation soon turned to the idea of visiting the deep-in-the-jungle waterfall. The more they talked about it, the more excited they became. But when Julio heard their plan, he immediately spoke firmly, warning them not to go. He even told Carmen not to take them there under any circumstances. However, the next morning, the group had made a decision. They pestered Carmen relentlessly, convincing her that it was just a harmless adventure. Despite her initial hesitation, she finally agreed to take them. The group piled into Carmen's car, excited about the journey ahead. Meanwhile, Julio arrived at the beach only to discover that despite his warnings, Carmen had led the tourists towards the daring jungle of the Gap. Realizing the danger they were getting into, panic overtook him, and without a second thought, Julio got into his car and sped off toward the forest, determined to stop them before it was too late. Carmen and the group finally arrived at the point where the dense forest began. Beyond it lay the waterfall. As the car couldn't go any further, they had no choice but to continue on foot. Meanwhile, Julio kept calling Carmen non-stop, desperately trying to warn them, but she ignored every call, dismissing them, not realizing that she wasn't going to answer. Julio sent a voice message instead, urging them all to leave the area immediately. But Carmen still didn't pay attention, too caught up in the thrill of the adventure, walking ahead while laughing and chatting with Trevor and the rest of the group, completely oblivious to the danger lurking in the jungle. After walking for half an hour, they finally arrived at the waterfall. The view was breathtaking, and without hesitation, everyone jumped into the water, splashing around, taking photos and enjoying themselves. On the other side of the forest, Julio finally reached the area. As his spine tightened with fear, he immediately turned around, jumped into his car, and sped back to the waterfall. After having fun for a while, Trevor and Carmen decided to walk alone to a quieter part of the forest while sitting together, enjoying the moment. Suddenly, Carmen felt uneasy. It was as if someone was watching them. She whispered her concern to Trevor, who dismissed it as her imagination, but agreed to check the surroundings to reassure her. Trevor walked away, disappearing among the trees while looking around. Minutes passed, then more time, and he still had not returned. Growing increasingly anxious, Carmen called him, but there was no answer. Feeling uneasy, she decided to look for him herself. Meanwhile, Scott and the others were getting dressed after swimming when a piercing scream shattered the peaceful atmosphere. It was Carmen. Without hesitation, everyone ran toward the sound. At the same time, Trevor, who had been searching in the forest, also heard Carmen's screams and began running back along the path. He noticed something lying on the ground, the bracelet of Carmen. His stomach churned as he picked it up and continued forward. Just as he reached the others, he held up the bracelet and frantically explained that Carmen had disappeared. Alarmed, the group immediately began shouting her name and searching the area. But despite their efforts, time passed and there was still no sign of her. They realized something was very wrong. Scott pulled out his phone to call the hotel for help, but there was no signal. Determined to find a way to call for help, he decided to climb to a higher spot in hopes of getting a signal. However, the jungle seemed like a labyrinth. No matter which direction they went, it seemed as though they couldn't find an open area. It was as if the forest itself did not want them to leave. As they continued walking, night fell, making the dense forest even more eerie. Just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, they saw movement in the bushes. The creature that Julio had warned them about fixed its glowing eyes on them, and a wave of terror spread through the group. Panic seized them, and without thinking, they all ran in different directions, running blindly through the darkness. In the chaos, their desperate screams for one another were lost in the vast jungle. Trevor and Elena were catching their breath when a chilling scream sounded. It was Charlie. Without hesitation, they ran toward the sound, only to freeze in horror at the sight before them. Charlie's body lay lifeless on the blood-soaked ground, deep cuts covering his skin, his large, unblinking eyes staring into nothingness. Terror overcame them, and they turned to run as fast as they could back to Scott and Steve, panting as they recounted what had happened. The fear set in when the brutal reality hit them. The warnings from Julio were true. Something was in this jungle, and it was hunting them. Scott's fear quickly turned into anger, and he shoved Trevor. "It's your fault. It was Trevor who insisted on coming to this damn place. It was Trevor who kept pressuring Carmen to take them further into the forest, and now Charlie is dead. Frustration boiled over, and Scott pushed Trevor. The two nearly came to blows, but Elena and Steve separated them, urging them to focus on surviving rather than fighting. Realizing that they needed to find help, the group pressed on, searching for a higher spot. After what seemed like an eternity, they finally reached a place where a weak signal flickered on their phones. Without wasting any time, Scott took out his phone and began recording, his voice trembling as he spoke. "We're trapped in a forest in Panama. There's something here, something that's hunting us. Please send a rescue team. We don't have much time." He sent the video through the emergency app, making sure it reached all his contacts. Just as the message went out, a deafening scream broke the silence. It was Trevor. Scott and the girls ran toward Trevor's cry, their hearts pounding as they reached him to find Trevor lying on the ground, injured and struggling to move. Just as Scott stepped forward to help him, a shadow appeared behind him. The terrifying creature emerged from the darkness, its claws sinking into Trevor's body with a dreadful force, dragging him deeper into the jungle. His screams of agony echoed, while Scott and the others watched in shock, unable to do anything. Overwhelmed by fear, Scott turned and ran, his breath ragged as he stumbled through the thick foliage in a frantic escape. Unknowingly, he arrived at a dark cave. His pulse quickened as he entered, desperate for shelter, only to freeze at the ghastly sight before him. The creature was inside, hunched over the mutilated body of Charlie, devouring him. The crunching filled the space. Scott felt sick, his body trembling as he backed away as quietly as possible, knowing he had to leave before the creature noticed him. Carefully, so as not to make any sound, he exited the cave and ran off to find Steve and Elena. Meanwhile, Julio had returned and made it to the city. While he was sitting at home trying to calm down, his phone vibrated. When he checked it, he saw Scott's emergency video, and his eyes widened in horror as he saw Scott pleading for help, confirming his worst fears. Without wasting a second, Julio ran to his uncle, a respected elder in the local community. He showed his uncle the video and explained everything that had happened. His uncle immediately understood the gravity of the situation. By morning, Scott's video had gone viral. News channels across the United States and Panama picked up the story, and authorities took swift action. The governments of both countries launched an urgent rescue mission, deploying a search team with helicopters and ground forces deep into the jungle as soldiers combed through the vast wilderness. Scott, Steve, and Elena remained hidden, exhausted and terrified, until they heard a helicopter flying overhead. Relief washed over them. They were finally going to be rescued. Without hesitation, they ran toward an open clearing, waving their arms to signal for help. But just as they did, Steve tripped, screaming in pain. She had severely injured her leg. Scott knelt beside her, quickly applying pressure to stop the bleeding, while Elena hurriedly ran toward the helicopter to get help. Scott urged her to go, and although she hesitated for a second, she then nodded and ran forward. Meanwhile, Scott carefully lifted Steve onto his back and began carrying her toward safety. When Elena reached the military helicopter, relief spread across her face as she started signaling to Scott and Steve. A cameraman from the rescue team was recording everything, capturing the dramatic moment of their survival. A news reporter was also broadcasting the event live to the world, covering the harrowing rescue mission. Just as the soldiers were about to pull Elena into the helicopter, a terrifying shadow emerged from the jungle. The creature attacked with lightning speed, grabbing Elena by the hair and yanking her backward with inhuman force. Her screams echoed in the air as the monstrous being sank its fangs into her skull, devouring her head in seconds. The scene was horrifying, and millions of people around the world watched in shock as the live broadcast abruptly cut off. The news anchors were left gasping in horror before the channel fell silent, while Scott struggled to carry Steve through the dense jungle, determined to reach a safe place before they could go any further. The creature appeared again. It pounced on them, sinking its claws into Steve and trying to drag her away. Desperation surged through Scott as he grabbed a thick branch from the ground with all his might and hurled it at the creature's face, striking it hard. The beast let out a piercing, supernatural shriek and released Steve, but now it turned all its fury toward Scott. The creature tackled him, pinning him to the ground as it slashed him with its sharp claws. Scott fought back, kicking and punching, but the creature was too strong. Just as it opened its mouth to tear him apart, a series of gunshots rang out. The military had arrived. The soldiers fired, the bullets slicing through the air and striking the wounded and overwhelmed creature. The beast let out a furious roar before retreating into the jungle's shadows. Scott and Steve had survived. The soldiers rushed to their aid, lifting them into the helicopter and taking them to safety. Once in Panama, they were rushed to a hospital where doctors treated their injuries. Although they had escaped with their lives, the horror they had witnessed would haunt them forever. In the final moments of the story, the news presenters discussed the tragic disappearance of Scott's friends and the horrible creature captured live on television. Experts speculated about the hidden dangers in the Darien Gap jungle, and in response to the worldwide attention, the Panamanian government permanently imposed strict restrictions, banning tourists from entering the area. The screen faded to black with a chilling message. This story is based on true events.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.